We'll proceed further with our next talk. So we have Praveen Kanniah, who is joining us from PhonePe. He works as an architect for product security there. So to give a quick introduction about Praveen, so he has been in AppSec space for quite some time. I think almost for 12 years into the space, having tried his hands on various different aspects of application security, including manual penetration testing, rolling out Secure SDL, implementing secure code analyzers, automating pen testing, and developing a framework for container security and much more. So now currently he's working as part of the product security team, and then he's responsible for architecting some of the best UPI payment systems that we also see as part of PhonePe. So Praveen, thank you so much for joining us today. I'll pass it over to
Sure.
you.
Thank you, Nikhil. Let me share my screen. So, Nikhil, am I audible and is my screen visible?
Yes.
Okay, great. Let me start the slideshow. Cool. Okay. Hello, everyone. I think Nikhil has said enough about me. Just one clarification. There are multiple architects along with me who's actually designed the whole system, and I try my best to add the whole tips on security, etc., and stuff. But yeah, everything remains the same. I love AppSec, and like I said, like I love to break complicated things into simpler units and explain it to people. Hopefully, this talk is not going to be boring for you guys. So this is going to be on SaaS security. It's like seldom in the security space, right? You're always very strong about a lot of defenses, and there are certain things which you take less care about, and that's what breaks in the end. One such thing has been SaaS security in the last few years. The reason that I say is like even if you find or look at a lot of these bug crowd platforms, etc., and stuff, you will actually find vulnerabilities in SaaS platforms. Especially if you find one, it is basically exploited against all the instances that is being used by different organizations, right? So that is going to be the topic today, SaaS security. A quick disclaimer: I will be pointing out access control complications, etc., in certain application, but that doesn't mean that I'm trying to defame them or say that their platform has any issues. This is more about how one configures SaaS platform. So we will see that as we go forward. So beginning with the basic, right? What is software as a service? Wiki says this, Salesforce, Microsoft, right? But in short, it's basically a software that is offered as a web application based on a subscription model, right? The key is it is a software that is offered as a web application, right? You have a lot of SaaS applications. You have Salesforce, Office 365, Marketplace, Workday, ServiceNow. So here itself, you can see that there are different categories. So you might think that, am I going to talk about data security? Not until we talk about the solution side. But on a high note, SaaS apps will be used by organizations for its associates. Like, for example, you might be using Drive, you might be using Office 365 in your organization. That is for your employees, associates to store data, and you want to use it within the organization. So that is one type of SaaS. The another thing would be is applications like Salesforce or anything in the Azure cloud. You basically have a separate marketplace for SaaS apps, right? So these are going to be apps that your services might use or one of your org's business might actually use. So a simple analogy for SaaS app security, at least we're going to focus more on the SaaS apps that your business will be using, right? So if you ask someone who just knew English to actually read this, they would be like cats, puppies, table, chair, apple, orange. So they would not have any issue. But assume that you ask someone who knows English and French to read this. At share, they might be confused because it is share, which means flesh in French, right? So this analogy might sound very weird now, but this is what it is. If you see something with the knowledge that you know, you will only be able to get something out of it. But more you know, the better you will understand. And that's the whole perspective of SaaS app security, right? So when it comes to SaaS, who owns what, right? People prefer SaaS, or organizations prefer SaaS for the whole reason that you have very, very less work to do, right? The physical security is taken care, infra, network controls, OS, most of it is basically taken care by the provider itself. All you need to do is very less, right? You have IAM. Okay, 1 minute. I will just minimize this. Yeah, you have IAM and you have data accountability, and IAM is also partial, right? Now, if you actually see, yeah, this is out of scope, right? Identity, and then these are the two parts, right? When it comes to IAM, that is the access management and data accountability. Now comes the key part that generally when we look at a web application, like let's take Salesforce, right? I mean, for people who don't have any idea about Salesforce, let me give a quick context. Salesforce will give CRM based app, which is like customer relationship management. A simple use case would be is you are an organization and then you want to open a support portal where your customers would basically raise questions, cases, and raise complaints, and then you want to manage it. But you don't want to build this software, right? Salesforce offers this whole platform as a CRM. So all you need to do is go and purchase the SaaS, and you will be ready to go from the time your SaaS is provisioned. All you need to do is certain customizations and some configurations, right? So as infosec team, as pen testers, we think that this is going to be like, hey, this is a web application, right? So I will need to do all the security analysis that is required for a web application, right? But that's where we are wrong. So the general security aspects of web applications will be applicable, like the OWASP top 10, right, or any other client server related vulnerabilities, etc. But there is also the software part to it. So most of the SaaS apps would have traditionally been a software, right, not a web application. Now these softwares have peculiar access control, right? Now web is something that is standard. You have different kinds of access, IAM, which is access control, identity. You have certain standards. By looking at something, you will know, okay, this belongs to this category. But now when it comes to software, there's no such definitions, right? Every software is going to have their unique access control or identity management. And that is where SaaS is going to be a little special. So what most organizations think securing SaaS means, right? They would just put up their single sign-on page, right? And then they will make them log in, and they think that we're good with SaaS, right? We have an identity that is solved, and no one else can actually get into a SaaS platform. But that only covers the I in the IAM, right? There is access management and data permissions, and that is where things actually mess up in SaaS security, which has led to a lot of data leaks. But thanks to bug bounty, that these are being reported in a very controlled manner, right? Now let's look at a scenario where even if authentication is present, it can still lead to leaking sensitive information. We'll talk about Salesforce use case here, right? Like I said, Salesforce does a number of things, right? We'll talk about specifically on their SaaS CRM issues. Again, this is not something against Salesforce. This is again about how we as an organization, if we procure Salesforce or any SaaS apps for that matter, how misconfigurations are actually going to lead to data leaks. So now this is what you're seeing is basically the design of any SaaS, right? Now, in terms of Salesforce, very specifically, like we told, the infrastructure is going to be taken care by Salesforce. The platform is going to be taken care by Salesforce. Now, the scenario we're actually going to do is, let's say that we are an organization and we are actually going to start a customer support application. So we don't want to develop it in-house. Let's call one of the SaaS providers and get a CRM platform. Now, in this case, it is Salesforce, right? So everything is ready and you are an organization admin. And then what you get to do is you can build your own UI if you want. You can customize it. And then there is this whole point of security controls, right? Where you actually configure a number of things, right? Let's say that your organization admin is going to be someone who knows probably about how do you want to serve or design this whole support system and a little bit about Salesforce, right? But all we need, or the prime objective of the admin, is going to be that I will need this application up and running. Security, yeah, I mean, it's okay. I think I will talk to the vendor and make sure that it is taken care of, right? But it's still fine, right? Now let's come to the important part, security controls, right? Whether it is complicated for a common user or not, it's perspective, but let's take a look at it, right? Now, this is a typical Salesforce web request, okay? I'm sure there are DevOps, and I don't know if there are people who are interested in web app security, and I don't know if people can talk, but you guys can give a guess as to, like, say, if you're a security analyst, what all would you basically look into this request and try out, right? I'll make it a little simpler to you. The upper part you see is the general request. These are the verbs, and then these are the URI, then the headers, and then below what you see is the body, request body, right? It's a post request. What I'll do is I'll try to decode this post body request and then show it to you guys. This is the post body request. So you can probably give a guess as to what all you would look into this request as a pen tester or a security analyst, or even if you're a developer, what all would you try to take care of in this whole request? Nikhil, is it something that can be made interactional, or like no?
Yes, Praveen.
Okay.
We people can add their comments in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Any guesses? If no, I'll proceed. But at least I hope I'm not like it's been interesting for a while, I'm assuming. Okay, I'm guessing I've really either put folks to sleep or look into Pat. Okay, what is Pat? I'm sorry, if you can, Praneeth. Personal access token. Okay, cool. Okay, personal access token, look into descriptors. Okay, good. Right, like there are some guesses. So if I was basically, I mean, I am a security analyst, but if I was someone who just knew web application security and nothing about good injection attacks, right? Yeah, right. So if you were someone who knew security, you will definitely try for looking for access tokens. You will look for injection attacks, right? And then probably like you see ID, and then you might see that if it is something that it is an identity that is exposed directly from your code. So you change 563 to 564. Am I going to get another user's data, right? So these are all something, or a context for non-prod. Okay. Wow, Ankit, what can you brief a little bit? You kind of told something very Salesforce contextual. Oh, okay. Or a context prod, non-prod. I understood the mode you're talking about. Okay, cool. Very nice. Right. So all of these guesses, right? So it is amazing. I'm sure that you guys are from the developer background. You guys have really good context about security also, right? So now, if like, let me put my web application analyst role, and if I looked at it, like most of you guys have guessed, I would have definitely tried injection attacks. Now this injection attacks could be SQLi, LDAP, etc., whatever is applicable to this request. I would have also tried IDORs like 563 to 564, right, and random fuzzing. I would have looked for access tokens, etc., right? And like Ankit pointed out, I could probably change the mode from prod to non-prod, right? These are some things, right? Cool. Now let's assume that we are an org, and we have got this app, and we've got it infosec approved also. We'll come talk about it later, and then say some security analyst is looking at the request. They will do all this and then say that we give a safe report. All right. Now let's come or look at the whole aspect of Salesforce. Right now, this might be something that is very useful to you or might not be. So you can just ignore. But what you have to understand is how complicated is it for a common man to quickly understand. You remember the whole organization admin who is actually going to manage this entire application, right? So for him, this basics is very essential, right? So in Salesforce, everything is basically a table, right? As simple. This is how, I mean, I cannot say I'm a Salesforce expert, but with the little knowledge that I have, everything is basically tables, right? So what did we want to build? We wanted to build a support system, right? And the case that really means here is a customer will actually create a case if they have any ticket. You can call it like a ticket, right? So case ID, case name, reporter, right? In Salesforce context, this is the table name, or what we call as the object. And then we have column name or field name, and then we have records. Okay. Now, how is an object accessed? Or for example, I'm more interested, like, let me put my hacker shoes here. I'm more interested to extract sensitive information. Now, for me, this is gold, considering that everything is stable in Salesforce, right? There might not be an SQL injection directly, but there could be some ways through which I can access data, right? Now, moving to a developer's perspective here, right? Now, say that I want a page to create case. Salesforce would actually provide you all this by default, right? You just need to open the web application and most of the things would be actually ready for you. You don't have to do much, but say you can also customize, right? But internally, say you want to create a case, you see the small box here, right? It's create case. So this is where a customer would go and say that, hey, this is my name, this is my complaint, etc. and stuff, right? Now this is called as the or a component. Okay. Next is we will have controller. Like you can have a drop down, you can have a list. Like what is that you're trying to do, right? That's controller. And action is actually functions on the object, right? Now you can probably relate it to different select queries, right? But in a very abstracted manner, right? So you have component, you have controller, you have action, right? Now the access control part, right? Remember how I said SaaS is mostly software plus web application. So software will have something that is very specific to the software. Now, an access control that is being built as a software later exposed as a web application, right? Now, with regards to Salesforce, you have multiple ways of performing access control. Like how you see, this is not something that you will see in an ideal web application. Access controls are based on roles, right? Mostly, right? But here it is not like that. You have a user-based role, right? You have a user, and then you have profiles, you have permission sets, you have sharing rules, right? Like we don't have to really go into everything, knowing what. But what I'm trying to say is they probably would have thought that they are actually giving a lot of features and independence to their customers. But for someone who doesn't understand it, it's a little complicated, right? And then we have object level permissions, field level. Field level is column name, and then record level permissions. It's the actual table records, right? So if you actually see the contacts, the third scenario, one can have an object level permission, but one cannot have a field permission. But still, they can have a record permission, which will include all fields, right? So this might definitely make a lot more sense for someone who totally understands the system. But for an organization who is actually just getting an application for not wanting to build an app and also hold sensitive information and managed by someone who doesn't understand the context completely, it is going to be very difficult, right? Now let's come back to the same Salesforce request and let's go back and see what is the most important point here, right? You see here in the descriptor, this is something that we never would have thought about. Even me, if I didn't have the context, I'm not saying that I'm great or something, but as a web pen tester, if I didn't understand this whole perspective, I would not know this is what it means. This is the controller. This is the action, right? So objects, controller, action. So this is more like an indirect SQL query for me that I will be able to get the data from a particular object, right? But this is not something that is wrong by design, right? This is how they have designed it. I'll tell you exactly where things can go wrong, right? So um, in Salesforce, there is a concept called unauthenticated user, who's called as a guest user, right? Say you have a support portal. Let's come back to the same scenario. Now the support portal will have some articles, which is basically like static content, which you want your users to access without authentication. But say the moment you create a case, moment you create a ticket, then you want someone to be authenticated, right? So you're going to have a view page which is unauthenticated, and you're also going to have authentication. But imagine what all sensitive data there is going to be. There's going to be customer information, there is going to be customer emails, right? And if you are kind of managing financial information, those kind of transaction IDs, etc., also would actually go into this whole support portal, right? Now, if me as an organization admin didn't understand this whole use case and I would configure something in such a way, right? There are chances that as an unauthenticated user, you will be exposed to certain sensitive information, right? Now, that is the whole context here, right? When you mean SaaS, you can do a lot of these misconfiguration identification, but what that is going to give you is even if you're an unauthenticated user, there is a possibility that there's going to be a data leak. And if there's going to be a data leak, there's going to be a huge one, right? So on this specific Salesforce, I did quite research just to understand things, right? So if you actually see, I told you Salesforce offers the whole CRM as is, like default, right? So objects, where do I get the list of objects? Now there are a set of standard objects around 800 and growing that is publicly available. How do I know about the controllers? How do I know about the actions? Now, from my little understanding, which has been like a year ago, there has been two JS files which will actually give you the different combinations of controllers and actions, right? And then you know that an unauthenticated user is also called as a guest user. And to know if this particular misconfiguration exploit can happen, I will need to fuzz to first of all understand that this application is configured with certain URLs like SF sites, Aura, etc. and stuff. If you don't even use Aura, this will not even be applicable to you, which is basically one of the key features if you want to explore the CRM UI, right? And how do you know if a guest user is even enabled for the application? If the site does not lead you to a login page, right? Now, again, I wished I could actually show a demo, but then I wasn't sure what would be the whole disclaimers, etc., and all this stuff. But you could basically go to search for Salesforce application, right? You have multiple ways to find if an application is Salesforce. You can do a lot of things, right? If you go there and then if you see the SF sites, Aura, etc., right? You know that it is actually going to be a Salesforce application. Then in the whole request I showed you, there are certain functions. So even as a guest user is going to return you information. Now, this is going to be information about the whole SaaS itself. Like, for example, if I go and searched in get object info about case, it is going to give me a lot of details, including the column names, like how many records, a lot of information like that. It will actually give you even as a guest user. The same with config data, like how your SaaS app has been configured, or it gives me a list by object name, right? So this is going to give me a lot of recon information. Now, next comes the actual misconfiguration, where you remember the whole access control page, where you can give object level permission, field level permissions, and record level permissions in case you messed up something. There are two functions like get items and get record ID, through which if you just gave the object name or the record ID, you would actually be able to retrieve the contents of the table, right? As simple as it looks now, right? This all would not have made sense if we actually didn't understand this whole context, right? This is misconfiguration one. There has been a lot of misconfigurations which has led to data leaks and been reported in the whole bug bounty programs, right? The misconfiguration two is, of course, there are going to be users who are actually going to create, a number of custom code, etc., and stuff, right? So for that, you will literally need to make sure that you create it the right way, right? Already you have less information about the whole application, right? Then you are actually creating custom functions and controllers, etc. I'll give you a small example how this could go wrong. So imagine you are actually creating a custom I would say controller to get the sales data, and also you are actually giving a permission to delete the sales data by an ID, right? Now, if you have not configured it right, these functions are actually going to be available as part of the JS files I showed you as part of the recon, right? So what I can do is not only I can get information, I can also perform unauthorized deletes, right? You see how dangerous this can be, right? This is just with the context of Salesforce. Now, if you ask me, if you tomorrow call me, hey, Praveen, like there is another SaaS application, would you know? I would say no, because it is very different. It is a software and it might totally have a different access control, right? An example would be is like you see here, it will give you the sales data. If you ran that function, it will also delete a sales ID if you actually perform this action, right? So this is kind of the whole major havocs that SaaS security, SaaS applications can cause. Today, if you think your organization has a number of SaaS application, but you probably have less visibility into it, and probably you feel that, hey, it's just a SaaS, and that not many of them might have an understanding. But if you actually see the last 2-3 years, there has been a number of large, I would say at least these Salesforce misconfiguration leaks that has been happening. So tomorrow it can be a totally different SaaS that you're using, right? So that is where securing SaaS is actually very important, right? Now, like I said, SaaS is a very broad term, right? Like you will have an organization where SaaS applications like 365 or Google or anything would be used for your associates or employees. Next is securing the SaaS applications itself, like the way we saw right now, right? What do I mean when I mean like securing the organization on the usage of SaaS apps, right? You're an organization and you want your users to basically push data into Office 365, which is something that you have provisioned for your organization, but you don't want them to basically upload something to Dropbox, right? This is where you will need to apply a SaaS solution that is very different, right? But not the one that we are talking about, right? So there are a number of solutions. You like, I might even have to note it down to get the full forms of this. There is CASB, there is CSPM, there is CWPP, SSPM, right? And there are a number of providers who basically provide solutions for all of this, right? But today we would look into the two major aspects. One is the CASB, which is where you kind of secure the organization on the usage of SaaS apps, and then SSPM, which is basically securing your SaaS apps, which is used for your business purpose, right? The main difference between these two is in SSPM, you're going to get the misconfigurations in audit trail, right? So quickly going through the CASB, the solutions, the different CASB solutions before we jump into the SSPM, right? Just to make things clear, right? So they are going to basically talk via API, right? And they're going to allow or block, as simple as that. Now they have API mode, they have reverse proxy, and they have forward proxy. Reverse proxy is where you are an org user, you try to access something, right? Then the reverse proxy is set up to the CASB solution, and then calls are made whether you want to allow it or disallow it, right? Whereas forward proxy is more like a web gateway proxy. So nothing basically goes into the app to decide whether it is sanctioned or unsanctioned. All the traffic goes to a web gateway proxy, which is redirected to a CASB solution. And then these solutions, this CASB solution later decides if I'm going to allow this request to this app, or I'm going to reject it because it is going to an unsanctioned app, right? This is more like an informative thing, so that whenever you search for SaaS security in the web, it is very confusing. It actually throws in a lot of solution. Just wanted to clear the air on that part, right? Now comes to the whole context of what we were talking about, right? Securing the SaaS apps itself, right? There are a number of things that we will have to look for. One is the security misconfigurations, misconfigured data and user permissions, etc. and stuff, right? That is where SSPM comes into picture, right? Now, when I mean SSPM, they are very focused on a particular SaaS application. Like I've been telling from the starting of this talk, that if I want to, I will not be able to form a framework for every SaaS application there is and create a security tool or an automation. Not possible. One needs to detailedly study about every SaaS platform security and then come up with something. So today, if you actually looked at tools in the market, you will find two types of tools. One is a SaaS tool, security tool, which will promise you to perform security scan on 32,000 SaaS application. Another would be is just 7, right? So the first one, where it promises the SaaS security of 32,000 SaaS apps, would be just the higher overview, which even the SaaS app would do, which is basically looking for, if Salesforce itself has a security console, which will tell you that your cookies are enabled, you don't have CSR of protection, you don't have some headers enabled, right? But this is something that we less care about. Like, I mean, this is something that we can detect even as an AppSec team or a pen testing team, etc. and stuff, right? But what about the things that we don't know? What about the complicated access control that every SaaS platform carries, right? So that is where the second part I said, where there are tools which will only take care of security tools, which will only say, hey, we only promise the security for 5 tools, right? So they go deep. They can understand this, complexity of this SaaS, the access controls they provide. They will identify those misconfigurations. Not only that, they will also let you audit those trails, and then also create policies. So if someone is basically going to change something, it will not let you change, right? So that's where this basically helps, right? But on a nutshell, right, when we use SaaS apps, right, the workflow is uh, before you pick up a solution for a SaaS, make sure you look at a SaaS app itself, make sure you look at its security controls, right? So if you feel it is very complicated, there is a necessity that someone in your team needs to master that expertise, or you will need to get a tool to secure it, because these are the ones which do not go through your CDN or any of the protections as much as you can configure, because it is totally controlled by the provider itself, right? And this might be the target for a lot of attacks, uh, right? Now, the second most important thing is, even you're writing custom code, right? In this case, say that you have a automation in your CI pipeline, but that also is for the code that you check into the repo, etc. Now, this is going to be totally different. You might want to push the code to the SaaS platform itself. So that CI pipeline scan might not happen here, right? Now, this can basically have vulnerabilities, but it basically escapes your complete CI pipeline, right? And the last most important point, whenever you have SaaS applications onboarded to your organization, the process is the InfoSec team will do an audit, and no one is basically going to test this application, pen test this application, because most of the time for the third party apps, most of the organizations, they would just get reports from pen test reports done by other external security vendors on their platform, and they would give a go ahead. That makes sense for the platform, but if you actually see from the talk, what is the more bigger concern is, every deployment instance is going to be different, and an organization admin is going to manage it, who pretty much might not have every context about the SaaS application that she or he is going to manage, right? So in that case, all your InfoSec approval, well and good, but if you do not test the misconfigurations of your instance, there is a high probability that it could lead to a data leak, right? So that's kind of the conclusion. If you really are more interested in the Salesforce things that I mentioned, I've created blogs which talks about data security in Salesforce, and also how do you pen test Salesforce. And if you have any questions offline, you can always reach out to me, LinkedIn, Twitter, etc. But yeah, that's pretty much the talk. Nikhil, over to you.
Thank you so much, Praveen. Thanks for that. Do we have any questions for Praveen?
Okay, so I have either put most of them to sleep, or I've been
No,
very
not at
clear,
all.
and yeah, I've been a little clear on what it is. So cool.
I think this was a really good talk. I was certainly looking forward to this talk for sure, because I think the way the SaaS applications are looked at are totally different when it comes to security, right? And certainly, there's no one size fits all when we talk about SaaS.
Great.
So, yep.
Cool.
Okay, we're getting some good comments for the talk.
Cool. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
Cool.
Okay. Cool.
Okay, someone's joined in from Mexico. I think the talk has been really insightful then.
Cool.
All right. Thanks a lot, Praveen. Thank you so much for joining us.